Hey, what is up? It is Antho once again, and today this is going to be my probably final video on all the variations of the builds. We'll quickly go over basically the gearing and how the builds differ. So basically the League Starter version ends with about 4100 life at level 94. You can drop this level like 90 by just dropping a couple of life nodes here and there or such. Or like a damage node here, which isn't that much damage lost. But this version of the tree goes max block, 75% block, and 45% spell block. You can pump this up to 51% spell block with a blue nightmare, but blue nightmare is always going to be solidly expensive, so I want to keep this as cheap as possible. Once again, shout out to Incommodious for helping with this. I didn't really contact him, but I kind of ripped some of his tree and some of his ideas. I'm not going Fan the Flames like in his version. Instead, I'm just using Ignite Proliferation support, because Ignite Proliferation support is just a good support gem in general. It's got the most damage after Swift Affliction, and I hate Swift Affliction with a passion because it reduces your Ignite duration by a ton and kills your total damage per Ignite. Even though it doesn't list it in PoB, it shows 13 million ignites when it's not. It's kind of because 7.3 second ignite, 7.37 second ignite. It doesn't actually work. The 25% less duration of supported skills and damaging elements to inflict doesn't work in PoB. It's not coded properly, so it doesn't apply. So it actually is killing your total damage per ignite, which is important. And ignite duration I value a lot because it makes your bossing setup just a lot easier. And it makes your clear better because your ignite proliferations are going to last longer. Your ignites are going to last a lot longer, which means that you're going to proliferate more. If you have like a 3 or 4 second ignite, it's only going to proliferate for 3 seconds, and you're only going to get a little bit of clear. In really dense maps, you're going to have proliferation for a full 7 seconds, and it's going to be fantastic. So that's how I feel about that. And just bossing with more damage per ignite is just good because you get the ignite off, you get your flame surge down, you refresh your flame surge every 4 seconds or so. Your wave of conviction every couple seconds, and you're good. And the ignite just continues burning the boss away. You can run around in circles, you can dodge boss mechanics, and you're still doing damage for a good over 7 seconds. And this is achieved through a couple different passive skill points. Oh, that's the wrong one. It's actually more than this. 15% increased duration, and we're up to 7.9 seconds. That is fantastic. That is amazing. So definitely when you're in endgame, pick up the 15% increased duration of elements, which is also why I go over here and pick up these duration nodes, increased duration of ignite duration, even though this is technically more damage. Because I heavily value ignite duration. It just makes your life a lot easier. Trust me, I've run ignite builds a lot. Ignite duration just saves your life a lot of the time. It just makes bossing so much easier. And clearing better because you're proliferating for a longer period of time. So we are going Martyr of Innocence because it's pretty much the best for Hexblast, because Hexblast is now getting a large percentage of damage effectiveness. It's going up to 210% from 150%. And just the massive amount of flat damage here is just fantastic. Adds to your basic ignite damage a lot. And also it has a ton of block on it, which is really nice. Up to 34% attack block, which makes capping block really easy with just a few clusters. Just this cluster, and this cluster, and then one here. And you were completely capped with Rumi's Concoction up. And this is going to bring up your spell block a lot actually. We're using a Eye of Malice, which is going to be pretty cheap. It's got high fire and cold resistance. The inflict cold exposure, fire exposure on his is irrelevant because we're inflicting exposure already with Wave of Conviction. The Wave of Conviction is 15%. I think this only gives 10%, so it doesn't really matter. The Wave of Conviction is going to supersede it anyway. The important part here is nearby enemies have 50% increased fire and cold resistances. At first glance, this would seem like it's terrible, but this multiplies negative resistances. So if you have negative 50% elemental resistance or fire resistance on an enemy, this is going to increase that to negative 75% resistance. So without this, we're losing a solid bit of damage. Gives us about 100k extra damage and about 1.1 million extra damage per ignite. So Hive Malice is great. It's only got a level 45 requirement. These are usually pretty cheap. These are pretty good, really good. And then we have just a random Saintly Chainmail I found on trade for 6 length for like 10C in standard. Before that, you can use a Tabula Rasa. Incandescent Heart is also an option because it gives more damage and it has a lot of armor and a lot of energy shield, which we want both of those. So that's pretty good, and it makes elemental damage taken as chaos, which doesn't really matter because we're not really going to cap. Actually, we are going to cap chaos resistance, but we're not going like Divine Flesh and going like 90% chaos resistance. So Incandescent Heart is a good early option, but in the end, you're going to want a chest with like over 1200 armor-ish. Early on, you can get like 1000 armor, 250 energy shield. That'll be good, and you can get like a 5 link of that. But in the end, you're going to want like 1200 armor and like 300 energy shield. Preferably with some resistance on it, just to help resist cap. Because we are pretty unique heavy. Even though we are running Period of Elements, which is going to help a lot. Because it's going to give 34% elemental resistance. Actually, more than that. Let's crank up to 30. Because the buff is going to be up to 30%. And let's see how much Period of Elements is giving us. It's giving us 39%. Because we do have some aura effect from the Sovereignty cluster. So that's pretty nice. Vixen's Entrapment is huge for quality of life, and it gives an additional curse, so a lot of extra damage. This makes socketed curse spells, triggers socketed curse spells when you cast a curse. So in the gloves, we have Elemental Weakness and Punishment. So then when we cast Flammability elsewhere, which we have, where do we have it? We have it right here. When you cast Flammability on any enemy, it's also going to cast the Elemental Weakness and Punishment at the same time. So you're going to get 3 curses with 1 click of a button, which is really nice, and it gives an additional curse, so extra damage. It also gives curse cast speed, which just helps your clear and your bossing, because your flammability is going to be able to be cast a little bit quicker. Windscreen Boots, just for the additional curse and some elemental resistance, these are usually pretty cheap. The only issue is that it has pretty low movement speed. But that's not too much of an issue because we're not really a zoom build anyway. We're kind of a mid-tier clearing build. We can clear pretty quick, but not like super fast. Amulet is just going to be an amulet with plus 10 maximum doom. You can get this by slapping an Essence of Delirium on any amulet. Preferably a Citron amulet because you want the strength and dexterity because you're going to need both strength and dexterity to use your skills. Strength lesser so because we're actually picking up a solid amount of strength by pathing down here. But otherwise you're going to need the dex for a couple different gems. And we don't pick up a lot of dex in this tree at all. So the additional dex is very, very good. And then it just doesn't need to be a hunter item, by the way. Does not need to be a hunter item. Eventually we're going to want +1 chaos gems or +1 chaos gems or +1 intelligence gems in the mid-tier or endgame version. So that's why I have that as a hunter amulet. But you do not need a hunter amulet to start. Just slap an Essence of Delirium on any Citron amulet and then craft life on it or hope for good life roll. If you get a good life roll, you can craft resistances on it, which is great. And then just anoint something like Searing Heat on it, which is pretty cheap. Amber, Azure, and Silver. The Silver is going to be a little bit expensive, but it's not going to be too bad. And before that, you can just anoint any other... You can anoint like, let's see, Divine Judgment. Divine Judgment is pretty cheap. CPTL Black. That's pretty cheap. But next, just a Pyre Ring, just for the extra burning damage and some solid resistances. The ignited enemies you hit or destroyed on kill does not work because we're not hitting them to kill them. We're burning them to kill them, so that doesn't get rid of porcupines or anything. So that's irrelevant, but still it's got a lot of burning damage, so just a lot of extra damage. Here we just have a life and resistance ring with a 2-stone ring with just life res and some chaos res. Chaos res, try to get it on as many pieces of gear as possible because we do want to cap chaos res or at least get it into the positives. Another here, just a belt with dex on it. This is going to have to be essence crafted because you cannot innately roll dex on belts, so just get some essences that give dex. You can also do essences that give dex in your ring. You can also get just dex in your ring and then a lot more chaos res in your belt or get more dex on your amulet if you want to, or craft dex on your amulet. But you can get dex in multiple places, or you can just pick up a dex node on the tree, and that'll help you out a lot. So next we have just a Stygian Vice. Once again, just a belt with life resistances, and we slap on regenerate life per second and some mana. The Abyssal, you want life, chaos res, and then damage over time while wielding a two-handed weapon. That's like the ultimate jewel. You're probably not going to get this. It's probably going to be a little bit expensive to get this, but maybe just throw on some aberrant fossils or something like that. Actually, I can't. Can you fossil craft jewels? I think you can fossil craft jewels. Play the game for 6,000 hours, and sometimes you forget stuff. So, our flasks are just cautious eternal life flask of staunching. So if we hit low life, we're going to get like 5,000 life over 4 seconds, so over 1,000 life per second, which is about the same as like divine life, instant divine life flask, which gives like 896 or something like that over instantly. But this just gives more life total, so I like the life, and I like the immunity to corrupting blood and the immunity to bleeding. Forbidden Taste, we use when take a savage hit. I would not advise using this until you have good chaos resistance. Before that, you can just use anything, but I would suggest using a quartz flask of any kind with any affix on it, any affixes on it. Maybe probably a chemist quartz flask of something. So you can get the phasing. Phasing is good. Not getting stuck on enemies is good. You're not going to have this up all the time because you're not actually going to be activating it manually. You're going to be activating it. It's going to be auto-activating when you take a savage hit due to an Instilling Orb or Enkindling Orb. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's Instilling Orb. Just roll it until you get savage hit. So that's when you take a big hit, it's just going to pop your life back to full. Rumi's Concoction gives a lot of armor, gives block and spell block, which we like. Just no-brainer. Taste of Hate gives fizz damage taken as cold, which is maybe not the best. Let me check. I have 268 and 228. So Taste of Fate actually is better. Taste of Fate's good. It's not really going to be super cheap. I'm not anticipating them to be that expensive though, so just pick them up when you have the money. I would say go for the Martyr of Innocence first though, and try to get a 5 or 6 link first, and then get a Taste of Fate later on. Then here we just have a Quicksilver Flask of Warding. You know, that's good. Here we have a medium cluster jewel with Smoking Remains and Circling Oblivion. So just damage and then damage and ailment duration, which is huge. Ailment duration brings us from 9 million to 10 million. Damage per ignite, which is big. A lot of quality of life. And then we just have a small Enduring Composure with the 2 stat, 50% increased armor, 30% increased armor, and then gain an endurance charge every second it's been hit recently. And then we pick up an extra endurance charge over here because it's 1 point, because we're already picking up this Jewel Socket, so it's literally 1 point, which is big quality of life, because previously you would need to take 4 points to get a Jewel Socket and an endurance charge. But now you only need to take 3, so 1, 2, 3. So that's pretty good quality of life. You save a node there. But next, we just have a Watcher's Eye, which you're not going to have first couple days, but try to get a Purity of Elements Watcher Eye with Chaos Resistance. The best possible is Purity of Elements Chaos Resistance plus flat armor when you're affected by Determination. But you're probably only going to get that in the endgame version. That's probably going to be quite expensive. Then we have an Intuitive Leap. You're not going to have the day 1 or 2 anyway, but it's going to save you some passives on the tree. And before that, just don't take these passives. In fact, by the time you're actually able to afford this Intuitive Leap, you're probably going to be at the level where you want to take this anyway. So before you have the Intuitive Leap, just don't take these on the tree. It's fine. You're probably only going to be in your 80s. But by the time you hit like 94 and you actually want these passives, well, of course, you're always going to want Skittering Runes, but this saves you 2 passive points on the skill tree. By the time you want these, you are going to have the money for Intuitive Leap. So let's see, tree. I have all the leveling skill trees here in the bottom left. First, we're going to take the spell damage and go Lightning Walker because we're going to do Orb of Storm, Stormblast Mine with Holy Flame Totem. Full leveling guide in the notes. when you want to gear stuff, links and stuff, when you want to do stuff. I describe some of my thinking and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. And then we go up here into like my Crow Prep, Breath of Flames, and then here we spec out of the spell damage nodes and Lightning Walker. It's going to take you 6 regrets, which you can get by doing the clear the thing for Tarkleigh off the mud flats. You get 2 from that. You get 2 from, I think, when you turn in the platinum bus to Hargan. And then you get 2 from Through Sacred Ground for Yena in Act 2. So you should have 6 by the time you want to switch to Hexblast anyway, so you can spec right out of those. And then you're not going to have 100% ignite chance, so I suggest taking boom this, and then you get 20% extra freeze and shock and ignite chance. So if you have 2 Ash Collar wands, that's not an issue because we're going to start with 2 Ash Collars. And then eventually we're going to switch to a Searing Touch at like level 62 when you want to take take the staff block nodes. So I'm not really going to explain too much about the tree because it's all in the leveling trees here. And I'm only going to have the leveling guide in the League Starter version. But let's quickly go on to the mid-tier version. So this deals with 5.2 million DPS, uses much of the same gear. It uses a couple of influence gear, like we go for an additional cursed chest instead of the boots. It's going to drop our armor down a bit. Actually, armor, energy shield, saintly chainmail. Whatever it's worth, is still run. Whoops. It's worth it to still run Windscreen. Probably not, because we want the movement speed. But regardless, you can get your extra curse on a chest, which is not that expensive, really. It's really not that expensive. You can get them pretty cheap. You can roll them yourself with alts. And we still have like 20,000 armor. This version is not going max block, but we still have a pretty solid hit pool, like 111,000, 49,000, 62,000, 51,000, 10,000, 650. That's only because we don't cap on Chaos Res. If we get a Watcher's Eye, I actually think this is with the Watcher's Eye. Alternatively, you can come down here and just pick up Asylum for 30% extra Chaos Res in the meantime while you're gearing up. So that's totally an option. Oops. But what else to talk about? Oh yeah, these are 2 prop large clusters rules. Circling the Oblivion, Smoking Remains on everything. And you're going to be dealing about 5.2 million versus about 1.2, 1.3 million of the starter edition. With 4,600 life, 20,000 armor, solid life regen over 500, automated cursing, Defiance Banner, Vol Molten Shell. We're going to have a solid life pool, and it's going to be rather survivable, but just the sheer damage we're getting over the starter version is worth the small loss. Well, it's not really small, it's a large loss in survivability, but the damage is going to make you more survivable in the end because you're going to kill bosses faster, you're going to kill enemies faster, they're going to have less time to attack you, and you're going to spend less time engaging with boss mechanics because you're going to burn them down quick. So this is the completed version of the mid-tier version, which is probably going to cost like anywhere from like, I don't know, 5x maybe for everything here. Maybe even less than that, because these 2 prop clusters rules are really not that expensive, and then the Circling Oblivion, Smoking Remains is really not that expensive, because those people go for like Blowback. Even though I think Blowback is a noob trap, because it just kills your damage per ignite. Even though it makes your ignite bit real good, it kills your damage per ignite, and your duration on your ignites is going to drop way down. It's going to be really annoying to keep up ignites on bosses, because you're going to have the flammability, You're going to have to Wave of Conviction. You're going to have to ignite the boss. You're going to have to recurse the flame ability. You're going to have to hit Flame Surge. You're going to have to hit your Infernal Cry if you're using Infernal Cry. And it gets really annoying doing that every like 4 or 5 seconds rather than every like 9 seconds. And every 9 seconds, beautiful. So that's the mid-tier version. And then we have the end game version, which is going to deal about 6.6 million DPS with 35 million damage per ignite. So that's really, really solid. Like the mid-tier version, let's see how much damage per ignite we're doing. Mid-tier version, for some reason, is doing 47 million damage per ignite. But if you want long damage per ignite, go for the mid-tier version. If you want a little more DPS but less damage per ignite, go for the end-game version with Wither. Because I cut out a Cluster Jewel setup here in favor of picking up the armor and determination stuff. And since we're going Occultist, we do need to get the Ignite chance wherever we can, because we're not getting Sheeper Flames. We're still at 100 because Black Flame, Plum Ability, Holy Dominion, yada 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 yada. Then a Divergent Ignite Proliferation for the extra 10% chance to ignite. But this has less damage per ignite. We're only getting 5.34 second ignites because Black Flame does 50% reduced ignite duration. But you also have to remember that Awakening the Mountain Ambulance is getting a big buff. Excuse me. And it's getting like 15 or 20% more increased duration of elements, I think, at level 5. So that's pretty cool. I have this at 14 because Awakening of the Elements is now getting 54% more damage to the elements at level 5. Which is a big damage increase. So it's perfectly viable to just run the mid-tier version and never go Black Flame, but Black Flame will do more damage, more ignite DPS per second in the end. And also you get the free 60% chaos resistance, and you get hexproof penetration and profane bloom, and then you get the free extra curse so you don't have to get it on gear. And then you get the 100% reduced life regeneration for bosses, which is good because Maven will make bosses regenerate life. This completely negates that, so that's good if you're farming like Maven bosses. The Occultist version is probably the way to go. But I will leave all the PoBs for all the finished versions in the description. This video has gone on really, really long. Oh, one more thing I want to mention. What is and what isn't this build, the League Starter version and the endgame version? So what it isn't, it is not a Zoom 1 billion XP per hour mapper. It's just not going to do that. It's not freaking Auto Bomber. It's not a Plague Bearer build that can just run around and delete stuff. It is not a 100 million DPS boss deleter. It's not going to be, General's Cry, Blade Flurry, Zerker, where it just deletes bosses. But it's not a build that can kill Cirrus 9 on a 1C budget. You're going to need to invest to kill Cirrus 9 or Cirrus 8. You're going to need to invest a little bit. But it is viable for most endgame bosses on a pretty tight budget. Pretty medium budget, just a few X. What it is, it's great League Starter and cheap budget. The cheap version is not that expensive and deals over 1 million DPS with like 9-10 million damage per ignite. So once you get that ignite off, then you slap your Flame Surge down. You're going to be dealing like 12.5 million over the damage of the ignite, which is pretty darn good. It has tons of room to grow with investment. As you can see, I was doing like 1 million, and now I'm at the base, 5 million with the mid-tier, and 6.6 million with the end-game. So it's satisfying to play. It's really fun to play, even though it is a 2-button build if you don't use Blasphemy, which I don't advise use Blasphemy because it's just another 35% aura to manage. It's annoying to fit in, and I want to be defensive. I want Purity of Elements, I want Determination, and I want Defiance Banner, and I want Clarity and Vitality. Because I want Sustain from Vitality, I want the Sustain from Clarity, because I don't want to have to struggle with mana ever. I want to be tanky against physical damage with Determination, and I want to be ailment immune with no other investment. I don't want to take stuff on the tree, I don't want to craft stuff on gear because it's annoying. I just want to be elemental ailment immune right off the bat. And the extra resistance also helps gearing. And then finally, it's fun, and it uses interesting mechanics. No other build in the game works the way Hexblast does, especially Hexblast Ignite. because the Doom mechanic of gaining Doom and then using Doomsday to wait 1 second for Doom to get max, and then Hexblasting, Wave of Conviction, it's just a really fun play style. It scales in a way that no other build in the game scales, so it's fun and interesting to build, and it's very interesting build to play. So it's pretty fun. So that's basically it. This video is now 25 minutes long. I'm not sure anyone's going to actually watch this entire video, but I'm going to leave all the end game, the starter, the mid-tier, and the end game in the description. Only the starter version is going to have the leveling guide in it, so if you want the leveling guide, go for the League starter. It's going to have that in it. The mid-tier and the end game are going to be basically respecs out of the starter version. So if you want to respec, start following the mid-tier if you have enough currency to start following that. So look for that. I'm still going to be releasing updates. I'm going to be releasing an update pretty much every day, or maybe every other day, as I go through the league and progress this character, so you guys can see the progress. If you want to, if it's got good reception, I'll make more videos about it. It might help some people gearing, like what to upgrade next, what you should do next, and in the process of upgrading your character, and etc. etc. So this video's gone on long enough. Peace out. Remember to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy this content. If you want me to make more content like this, so peace out.